I remember North Charlotte when I was a little girl, those years before World War II, and up until the time I graduated from high school, were some of the happiest times of my life. None of us knew of the dark clouds that were spreading across Europe that would have a major impact on our neighborhood and others across the country. Our house was not on the Mill Village as such, but it was on the street that was sort of the boundary line of the Mill Village. And of course we had so many family members. My grandfather brought his 9 children to the Mill Village in, I'd say, between 1906 and 1907, and lived there in a house right across from the mill. And so we feel that our family's been involved with that community almost from the beginning, because it was built in 1903 and 1904. But my memories are just happy ones. We just had such a host of close friends and so many family members. Most of our activities would center around the church, I think, because we, of course, were there. I don't think my mother and father were charter members, but they went there in the early 20s. And of course, there were so many children in the neighborhood. We just had a wonderful time. We played ball together. We did everything together.
The development of North Charlotte began in 1903 on rolling farmland 2 miles north of the Charlotte city limits. It was conceived by a group of wealthy textile leaders who envisioned a self-contained industrial district. 3 thriving mills sprang up quickly, and hundreds of people poured into the area to work and to live. The Highland Park Mill No. 3 and the Mecklenburg Mills were built in 1903 on North Davidson Street, then named Caldwell Street. Company-owned housing for workers was built adjacent to these mills, creating the classic mill village that was common around the early part of this century. These villages created a unique interdependency between the mills, their employees, and their families. The very existence of hundreds of mill workers and their families depended on the success or failure of the mills themselves. A small, compact business district quickly developed along North Davidson Street. This district provided the basic necessities for the mill workers and their families, while at the same time joining the 2 mill villages into one community. This area became the thriving Main Street of North Charlotte, with 2 drugstores, several grocery stores, a dry goods store, a doctor's office, and a bank. This business district was connected to uptown Charlotte by a trolley line, which ran down Davidson Street. The mill houses were of 2 basic designs. The Highland Park Mill Village houses were the type designed by noted mill architect Stuart Kramer. The Mecklenburg Mill Village house was of the D.A. Tompkins design, used originally in the Atherton Mill Village along South Boulevard. Today, most of the original mill houses and all of the mills, including the Johnston Mill built in 1911, are still intact. These represent one of the largest collections of mill houses in the state, and a remarkable opportunity to bring back to life the type of diversity and vitality that once existed. East of the mill village, toward the plaza, were the Wadsworth and Pegram estates. George Pierce Wadsworth, president of Wadsworth Land Company, began development of these properties in 1906. This rapid development brought a rich and diverse variety of housing to the area. Architectural styles ranged from the simple, functional mill cottage to grand 2-story houses. The architectural diversity of the houses seemed to mirror the rich cultural and economic diversity of the people who lived in them. People from all walks of life, from all ethnic and social backgrounds, lived and worked side by side.
There were always the poor, the wealthy, and those in between. But the mills served as the one constant, the very fiber that held the community together. Things weren't perfect by any means. Mill work was a tough, grueling day-to-day struggle. And even though it wasn't mentioned often, everyone knew that their existence was tied to the success of the mills. If the mills went down, they went down with them. There were always slowdowns and layoffs in the strike of 1930. But the bond between the residents of North Charlotte was strong. In those hard times, people depended on their extended families and neighbors to help them out in times of need. For the most part, it was a happy and prosperous time. The mills were thriving, and folks took pride in their work and in their community. North Charlotte was a safe and friendly neighborhood, a snapshot of Middle America, where neighbors knew each other by their first names. The prosperity was not to last. World War II changed the face of North Charlotte and its people forever. The boys I graduated from high school with were enlisting to go to Europe or Japan, while most of them had never gone beyond Mecklenburg County. Sent to some distant military base and then on a boat across the ocean, the young GIs that made it back had a taste of the world that would never again be satisfied by North Charlotte.
Car sales increased dramatically after the war. This, combined with enormous federal subsidies for road and housing construction, attracted many to leave the neighborhoods of their youth. Americans began to migrate to the new suburban frontier by the millions. Other factors played a major role in North Charlotte's decline. The mills had never fully recovered from the Great Depression, and in 1953, the unthinkable finally happened. The mills were sold to out-of-state investors, and the connection between the mill and the neighborhood was severed forever. Many mill workers lost their jobs, and since the mills no longer owned the housing, many lost their homes as well. The community began to fall apart at an alarming rate. More and more long-term residents moved out, and transients moved in to take their place. The strong sense of community that had held North Charlotte together in the first half of the century was replaced by apathy, fear, and an overall lack of trust.
The construction of Matheson Avenue in 1969 did serious damage to the southern edge of the neighborhood. It demolished homes, disconnected streets, and created a huge physical barrier that tore the neighborhood in half, a visual metaphor that seemed to represent the very breakdown of the North Charlotte community.
If I could change one thing about the North Charlotte area, it would be Matheson Avenue. Get our speed limit down from 40 because nobody observes it. At least, well, I'd like to see from Clemson down to Pinckney about 25 miles an hour, because this is, or this was, a neighborhood.
The beginning of the 70s found some portions of the neighborhood resembling a ghost town, a skeleton of a neighborhood characterized by deteriorating houses and vacant storefronts. But the 70s also saw the first glimmers of hope for the area with the Housing and Community Development Act of 1974. This act made low-interest loans and grants available for the rehabilitation of rundown housing. It also funded the construction of some small parks in the area, as well as a few other public improvements. The business districts on North Davidson Street and the plaza had declined until only a few viable businesses remained to barely eke out a day-to-day existence. Conditions remained largely the same in the 1980s. The neighborhood continued to sink into the mire of poor maintenance and neglect. There was still a high percentage of absentee-owned property that had been allowed to deteriorate.
The question is, what can the city do to help development in the neighborhood? And I'm not really quite sure, because I don't know all the logistics of stuff, but I think that one of the things would be, I don't know how the city could do this, but there's a lot of empty buildings down there. And I'd like to see the city lean on some of these landlords who own some of those empty buildings to either improve their property or sell their property.
An overall perception of fear and hopelessness permeated the area. But just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse, a few promising signs began to reappear. In the late 80s, new residents began to make substantial investment in the North Davidson Street Business District for reuse as galleries and studios. The area began to take on a new life and attract citywide attention. Friday night gallery crawls offered an alternative to the more established galleries of uptown Charlotte. New visitors to the area were struck with the realization that this was a district unlike any other in Charlotte. Pedestrians were free to browse through a row of galleries and shops that opened directly onto the street, like Soho or the Little Five Points area in Atlanta. The diversity of this district was unlike any other area in Charlotte. This was a real place, unpretentious and alive with possibilities. Other positive activities were occurring in North Charlotte. The Johnston YMCA continued to be a major resource for the community, with a broad spectrum of programs for area residents of all ages and populations. It also provided a central meeting place for the neighborhood. Area churches like Spencer Memorial United Methodist Church began to form alliances. These partnerships provided a variety of human service needs to residents in the community. It was indeed obvious that there were many people who had a great concern for North Charlotte and its future, and that they were doing their best to improve it. Continued lobbying of city government led to the formation of a task force in early 1993. This task force consisted of representatives from various city departments, along with area residents, business owners, and others who were interested in the revitalization of North Charlotte. This was the beginning of increased efforts by the city to address the problems in North Charlotte. What was really needed, though, was a plan, a roadmap to guide future decisions for the neighborhood. Finally, in October of 1993, the staff of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission was assigned the task of developing this plan, a plan to save the life of one of Charlotte's most historic neighborhoods. On a bright Sunday afternoon in November, a public meeting was held to explore key issues that stood in the way of this revitalization. Staff from the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Planning Commission met with over 100 local residents and business owners. They discussed a wide variety of issues ranging from crime and drug activity to the piles of junk that frequently accumulated on North Charlotte's streets. A diverse group of stakeholders was formed, volunteers from all areas of the community who could work with planning. Eventually, this blueprint would go before the Charlotte City Council for adoption. Key issues became clear very quickly. Number one on the list was neighborhood safety. The group agreed that a major effort was needed to drastically reduce the incidence of crime. No real progress could ever be made until people felt safe on their own streets.
I think one of the main problems we have is perception. It's always been somewhat of a rough neighborhood. I think it always will have a certain amount of that. We have a big mix from rental property to home ownership. And so I think just kind of from the past 30 years, the reputation of the neighborhood and what we're doing, and I think some people would like to see it go to be a Dilworth, but personally I don't see that. I just see it as trying to improve what we have and kind of maintaining it. So the biggest drawback I think is perception, though. It's really a safe place. It's safer than most neighborhoods. Most people don't understand that.
Second was housing. It quickly became obvious to the group that the neighborhood would never be on stable ground until the number of owner-occupied households increased dramatically.
I want to be here because want to improve our community at first, the Cambodian community as a whole. They live down here as a renter and not very many that have their own house. But since down here I see a lot of change. The change because they know about the good thing about life, you know, they get a good job and things go better, and we encourage them to be a homeowner, explain to them how, and because even though they want it, but they don't know where to go. And I'm being here as many times as a translator and get many resources from the different people. So now many people even become a homeowner. And that's really helped me here do my job with those people.
Next came commercial revitalization. Businesses in the neighborhood needed a jump start, particularly along North Davidson Street and the plaza. Part of that effort would be to improve the visual quality of these districts, creating an environment that would encourage new businesses to set up shop in the area.
I could see that it was possible to have it come back to just to a normal operating business district. Yes, not necessarily an arts district, which is kind of happened because of, I guess, people migrating here, not because we're here, but because all of a sudden there's a place that could be focused for a long enough time period. One of the situations we didn't want to get into with leasing was to lease a space and then kicked out, because we saw that happen to Limbo. We've seen it happen all over New York and in Brooklyn and in Cleveland and in Detroit, where people move in and they're leasing space and then, you know, they move on. So that was the one thing we weren't going to do, and that's the other reason we came out. We could afford to buy and make sure that this could maintain a life to it, you know. And that's an important factor, and that's really, I think the stability factor has been good.
The overall appearance of the community needed to be improved to attract both businesses and residents. Many parts of North Charlotte suffered from years of clutter and poor maintenance. Fifth on the list was traffic and circulation. Heavy truck traffic uses North Davidson Street. The high speed of traffic makes crossing Matheson Avenue very difficult. These, combined with the cut-through traffic on East 35th Street, are seen as the principal traffic problems affecting North Charlotte. And number 6, community relations. For the plan to work, the residents needed to learn how to get along with each other. North Charlotte's ethnic and economic makeup was both a blessing and a curse. The group agreed to work toward the formation of a community support network. A network that could respond to the needs of all residents without regard to income or ethnic backgrounds.
My contribution I feel that I can make to improve is, yes, working with the neighborhood, the Neighborhood Development Association, and that's where you get people from within the community who are interested in the community to come together and network with themselves, network with other businesses, and even the city, in terms of bringing together a program that will make the difference and a greater, from a greater spectrum than a more narrow one. And also for me as a person, I have to contribute of my time unselfishly in saying that, okay, this is what I can do. This is what I can do.
The stakeholders and planning staff met several times over the following months. Out of those meetings came a list of concise recommendations, a rescue plan to save North Charlotte. The development of a well-organized neighborhood association was seen as one of the principal vehicles to combat crime. This association would be made up of residents who represented the unique diversity of the neighborhood. Forming a neighborhood watch and working closely with the community policing officers would be the most effective way of reclaiming the streets of North Charlotte.
One of the things that we're suggesting is that we establish a neighborhood co-op. A co-op that would work within the jurisdiction of the neighborhood association, and we've had formed or having formed a North Charlotte Community Development Corporation that will be able to take advantage of some specific programs. But to work within that umbrella to form a cooperative of volunteer labor where you all get together and work on each other's houses. And we develop some expertise and try and get either the city or in working with Habitat, get somebody who is an expert in renovations to work along with us to set these jobs up. And the thought is that the first couple of houses, until you build up credits to get your own house work done, the first couple of houses go by lottery. So those people who want work done, we just draw by lot to see who gets done first, with the understanding that the first houses go on trust that those people will put in their time in other people's houses. And we're talking about new front porches, new roofs, maybe kitchen, bathroom, the things that are most needed in houses when they get to be the age of most of the houses in the neighborhood. I firmly believe that we need to do that first before we do much else. Because if we don't stabilize what's here and keep the people that are here, then we're not going to get new people in.
The development of more owner-occupied housing would initially focus on the original mill villages of Highland Park No. 3 and Mecklenburg Mills. Most of this development would target initial home buyers with modest incomes. A comprehensive effort was envisioned for these two historic villages, an effort that would include home improvements, repairing of public streets and sidewalks, lighting, tree planting, and new signage that would bring to life the historic characteristics of North Charlotte. A nonprofit organization, the North Charlotte Community Development Corporation, would be established.
The next thing we want to do is, other than establishing that co-op, is to work with nonprofit housing organizations such as the Housing Partnership and Habitat, the City of Charlotte and local banks to acquire rental housing, renovate it, and hopefully sell it so that we can get more owner occupancy. Owner occupancy always gives us, it seems to give us more of a sense of pride.
The Community Development Corporation would work with existing agencies and professionals to identify qualified potential homeowners. Existing residents would be targeted to participate in these home ownership programs, and area realtors would be encouraged to actively market the historic characteristics of North Charlotte. Habitat for Humanity would also be brought into the picture, providing yet another source for the development of owner-occupied housing. Current Habitat prototypes could be modified with gables, porches, and other features consistent with the classic North Charlotte house.
Probably resources that we could help them to be homeowner, like a bank that would loan money for them to purchase a house here, or the city or the county to put some program that would be able to give resources for people to purchase a home.
The North Charlotte Community Development Corporation would play a key role in the development of new neighborhood-oriented businesses on North Davidson Street and the Plaza. Low-interest loans through local banks and the city's Neighborhood Development Department would encourage the renovation and reuse of buildings. On North Davidson Street, efforts would focus on reestablishing the historic Main Street characteristics of this once thriving commercial district. Every effort would be made to clean up the overall physical appearance of the area, removing junk as well as adding landscaping and signage at entry points to North Charlotte. The Charlotte Department of Transportation is already looking at ways to reroute truck traffic that currently uses North Davidson Street. The department is also focusing on ways to minimize speeding traffic and provide pedestrian crossings on Matheson Avenue, a residential street that serves as a main thoroughfare for commercial traffic.
Those were the recommendations of the people of historic North Charlotte. Ultimately, it will be the people that play the main role in making it happen. The challenge will be for them to work together to achieve that goal. That challenge can only be met if we as individuals put aside our differences and prejudices and commit ourselves unselfishly to the well-being of our neighbors. Out of this grows a partnership of the historic North Charlotte Neighborhood Association, area businesses and churches, the Johnson YMCA, and various city and county departments that will work together to make this the kind of neighborhood we'll be proud for our children to inherit.
In the end, it is the spirit of the neighborhood, its sense of community, that will determine its vitality and future. That spirit once existed in North Charlotte and can rise again through the hard work of people who care.